Well, what is the resting membrane potential of a cell? Let's talk about the definition of that. The definition of the resting, right, a membrane of a cell at rest has a potential. What is potential? Potential is like, I think of potential as, if you're watching this video right now, you want to become somebody in life, you want to become a doctor. Well, you have the potential to become a doctor. You're not a doctor yet, but you have the ability, the potential to be able to do something. So resting membrane potential is actually expressed as the measured potential difference across the cell membrane. It's a measured potential difference across a cell membrane. This is often measured in millivolts. Well, this has been calculated already, all right? So I didn't come up with this. These are calculated numbers. Well, let's take a look at a couple of resting membrane potential of some ions. Let's take a look at, we're going to use E as a resting membrane potential. For sodium, sodium has a resting membrane potential of positive 65 millivolts, while calcium has a resting membrane potential of positive 120 millivolts. Potassium has a resting membrane potential of negative 85 millivolts. And the last cation, the last anion we're going to talk about is chloride, which has a resting membrane potential of negative 85 millivolts. Now let's take a look at a cell. A normal cell has potassium, a lot of potassium inside the cell. A lot of potassium inside the normal cell, while there's a lot of sodium outside the cell. A lot of sodium, a lot of potassium inside the cell, and there's a lot of sodium outside the cell. Now, what does these numbers mean? We said a resting membrane potential is the measure. We measure it, we capture it, right? Imagine if I can capture your brain and say, look, this guy is really smart. He's got a lot of potential. And I put a number on it. And I said, he's got a 100% chance of becoming a doctor because why? He gets 4.0 GPAs. He's very active in his organization. He did really well on his MCAT. He got into medical school. He's going to be a doctor. Now, if I capture that and I say, oh, let's put a number on it. That is the amount of potential that you have to become this. That's the same way I look at this resting membrane potential. The potential of this ions, which is usually measured across a cell membrane. Well, although you can see we're putting like negatives and positives, what actually happened is what you look at overall is the absolute value of 65. Now, if I say positive 65, the absolute resting membrane potential is 65 millivolts, and the inside of the cell is positive. For example, if I say the resting membrane potential of a cell is negative 70 or negative 85, let's pick potassium for example. If I say the resting membrane potential is negative 85, what I'm actually saying is the cell has a 70 or 85 millivolts of a potential difference of a resting membrane potential, but overall the cell has a negative charge. And we're going to talk about that in full details. Now, let's take a look at the essay note again. Now that we're talking about the resting membrane potential, for an essay note, the cell itself, it has an unstable resting membrane potential. Has a resting membrane potential. But before we move on to that, it's another important topic we need to talk about, which are action potentials, because before I can talk about depolarization and repolarization in the SA node, we have to understand what exactly action potentials are. So we're going to keep this on this side of the board. So let me erase this, because we're going to be talking about cardiac action potential. And I'm just going to write on this side of the board because I'm going to need some of these values. Let's put potassium here, which is negative 85 millivolts. Let's put sodium, that is positive 65 millivolts. And let's put calcium, which is negative, that's positive 120 millivolts. So, what exactly is an action potential? Well, an action potential is actually has a couple of definitions. We have depolarization. We talk about depolarization of a cell. So let's take a look at a cell. Here's a cell. When we say depolarization of a cell, well, depolarization is what makes the membrane potential less negative, which means the cell's interior becomes less negative. Well, the way I look at it is there's positive charges outside of the cell. And inside of the cells are negative charges. Negative. See that? So when we talk about depolarization, when depolarization happens into the cell, the positives are going to go inside the cell. So let's take this part and take all these positive charges and put them inside the cell. Well, here we go. See that? When we do that, I'm going to cut this. When all of a sudden the cell depolarizes and there's more positive ions inside the cell, we call that depolarization. See that? The inside of the cell is now less negative, which means there's more positives inside the cell. That is known as depolarization of a cell. Now, the opposite of that is known as repolarization, and repolarization is now when you take this negative, the negative charges are actually more on the outside of the cell. If we have more negative charges on the outside of the cell, we said that the cell has repolarized. Repolarization. Another terminology, right? So, talking about depolarization of a cell, it's important that you know that the inward flow of positive charges, like I mentioned initially, is what causes depolarization. And when the outward flow of negative charges onto the outside of the cell, that is what we term as repolarization of a cell. Now, when the outward current hyperpolarizes, it means there's even more negative charges outside of the cell, longer. That is known as hyper, like too much repolarization. And this will all make sense when we get to the SA node cardiac action potential. Now, let's go back and talk about the SA node. Now, the SA node has its own cardiac action potential, which I'm going to draw on the board. And this is what it looks like. If you are to measure how the SA node is depolarizing and repolarizing, this is what it looks like. Let's take 0 as the baseline here. And then we've got 20, 40, 60, and 80. It's actually all a negative, okay, because that's down, right? Positive would be going up, 0 down would be negative. Now, for an SA node that has an unstable resting membrane potential, what that fancy word basically means is, remember when I drew out the cell, I said the cell has ion channels. Now, these ion channels allow either sodium or potassium to go through them. It depends on the probability of this ion channel and what is permeable to, what it allows to go through. So if this is a sodium channel that likes sodium to go through, it's going to allow sodium channels to open and to automatically allow sodium to flow inside of the cell. Now, the interesting thing about the SA node is because normally a cell, let's say pick a muscle cell. For a muscle cell to depolarize, it needs an action potential from a muscle. Hey, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you learned a lot. Are you studying for the USMLE Step 1 or Step 2? Are you studying for the NCLEX or you're currently in nursing school as a nursing student? Are you a PA student currently in school or studying for your PANCE exam? Or are you a nurse practitioner student or trying to take your NP board exam? Listen, I've got super awesome content for you. If you truly love this video and it simplified your learning process, I want you to check out my website below. I've listed all the list of exams, whether you're studying for any of this board exam, and all I want you to do is click on the link right now below so that you can take you directly to my website. For USMLE, just go to smashusmle.com. For NCLEX, go to crushnclex.com. And if you're studying for the PANCE exam, the nurse practitioner exam, or you're studying for your internal medicine board exam, just click below and it'll take you directly to ftplectures.com. Listen, I can't wait to help you. If you need to get in touch with me, just get to my website, you're able to reach me directly, and we can work together one-on-one. Listen, you're super awesome, and my goal here is to help your dream come true. If you want to be a doctor, want to be a nurse practitioner, a registered nurse, or physician assistant, I'm here to help you get to that next level. With your medical knowledge, let's save the world together. I love you guys. You guys are super awesome. And do not forget to click on the link below to be able to get to my website. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You guys have a great day. Let's go.